Welcome to the New York State Homes and Community Renewal Section 3 Training and Technical Assistance Workshop webinar. What is Section 3? Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968 and implementing regulations ensures that employment and other economic opportunities generated by certain HUD financial assistance shall, to the greatest extent feasible, be directed to low and very low income persons. Section 3 is the law. It is not an option. What is a Section 3 covered project? A Section 3 covered project involves the construction or rehabilitation of housing, including reduction of lead-based paint hazards, or other public construction such as street repair, sewage line repair, or installation, updates to building facades, etc. Section 3 residents. Federal and state Section 3 policies require that any new employment opportunities be extended to qualified low and very low income residents of the affected area. Essentially, Section 3 residents are given priority in new hiring situations, which result from HUD's efforts to rebuild their neighborhoods. Who is a Section 3 resident? Public Housing Authority residents automatically qualify as Section 3 residents. Low and very low income persons who live in the metropolitan area or non-metropolitan county where a HUD-assisted project for housing or community development is located. Section 3 status is race and gender neutral. The preferences provided under this regulation are based on income level and location. Here is a copy of a certification form that Section 3 residents can fill out in order to become certified, and then it can be returned to HCR. What is low income? Low income includes anyone who is at or below 80% of the median income in the surrounding area. A low income person includes families as well as single persons. The HUD Secretary may establish income ceilings higher or lower than 80% of the median due to unusually high or low income families. What is very low income? A very low income person includes someone who is at or below 50% of the median income in the surrounding area. Very low income persons include families as single persons. The HUD Secretary may establish income ceilings higher or lower than 50% of the median due to unusually high or low income family incomes. What is a Section 3 business concern? Must be owned by Section 3 resident, 51% ownership, or have at least 30% of full-time employees who are currently Section 3 residents. This criterion can also be met if, within 3 years of the date of first employment with the business concern, the individuals were Section 3 residents, or provide evidence of a commitment to subcontract more than 25% of the dollar award for all subcontractors to Section 3 business concerns that meet these qualifications. Here's an example of the business certification form that business concerns can fill out in order to get certified as a business Section 3 business concern. HUD Section 3 Registry. Here is the HUD Section 3 registry in which business concerns can become self-certified. Nonprofit. A nonprofit organization can be a legitimate business concern if they also meet the criteria of a Section 3 business concern. Greatest extent feasible efforts. To demonstrate sufficient greatest extent feasible efforts to meet the HUD Section 3 contract goals, UGLGs, which is Unit of General and Local Governments, and their contractors, subcontractors, and subrecipients must carefully document the steps taken to obtain HUD Section 3 participation. Efforts to employ Section 3 residents to the greatest extent feasible should be made at all job levels. In determining whether a particular bidder has met greatest extent feasible efforts, a UGLG procurement officer may take into account the performance of other bidders in meeting the goal. For example, when the lowest bidder fails to meet the contract goal, but other bidders meet it, the procurement officer may reasonably raise the question on whether, with additional reasonable efforts, the apparent successful bidder could have met the goal. Section 3 triggers, thresholds, and contract goals. What triggers Section 3? The requirements of Section 3 apply to HUD recipients who are required to hire new employees due to an award of a $200,000 contract amount or more. In addition, all recipients receiving funds in an amount greater than $100,000 to complete housing construction projects are also required to comply with Section 3 requirements. All Public Housing Authority funds are subject to Section 3. Section 3 contract goals. At least 30% of all new employees hired have to be Section 3 residents, and at least 10% of the total dollar amount of all Section 3 covered contracts for housing rehabilitation, construction, and other public construction should be granted to qualified Section 3 businesses, and at least 3% of the total dollar amount of non-construction, for example, professional services, contracts should be granted to qualified Section 3 businesses. Who constitutes as a new hire? A new employee hire means a full-time employee for a new, permanent, temporary, or seasonal position that is created as a direct result of the expenditure of Section 3 covered financial assistance. Laid-off workers. Any employee that was on the payroll of a recipient, developer, or contractor on the day that Section 3 covered assistance was provided can be counted towards the Section 3 minimum numerical goal for employment. Highest priority levels. Highest priority level, number 1, goes to low and very low income residents certified as Section 3 qualified residing in the neighborhood where the project is located. Second priority, participants of public and social service programs funded by HCR HUD funding. Third priority, other low and low income residents throughout the state of New York who are certified as Section 3 qualified. Note, as the rule currently stands, Section 3 residents and business concerns can be drawn on a national level, though HUD prefers local outsourcing in the impacted area. Contractor, subcontractor responsibilities for adherence to Section 3. Contractors, subcontractors responsibilities. HUD-funded contractors and subcontractors' responsibilities include, but are not limited to, implementing procedures designed to notify Section 3 residents about training and employment opportunities generated by Section 3 covered assistance, included limited English proficient populations across New York State and or the immediate project area. Implementing procedures designed to notify Section 3 business concern about opportunities generated by Section 3 covered assistance. Facilitating the training and employment of Section 3 residents, and documenting all actions taken to comply with meeting the Section 3 employment and contracting goals, the results and any impediments faced. The Section 3 plan. Mandatory Section 3 plan for prospective bidders. All bids or responses to RFPs for funding must submit documentation addressing how they will meet Section 3 participation goal via the Section 3 participation plan. Commitment to Section 3 utilization will be a factor in the bid or responses for RFPs for funding selection process. Bids submitted without a completed Section 3 plan should be considered non-compliant and invalid. Similar to HCR, all contractors, subcontractors must have a Section 3 plan. HCR will review and, where necessary, assist its contractors, subcontractors with revising their plans in a manner that will ensure approval by HCR Section 3 coordinator. Any refusal to fulfill contractual obligations with the HCR pursuant to an approved Section 3 plan can be construed as a breach of contract. The Section 3 plan must include specific information regarding the following: identification of the project area, specific information about the recipient's current workforce, payroll reports, etc., specific plan for hiring Section 3 qualified residents, specific plan for engaging Section 3 designated businesses, and, if applicable, each HUD Section 3 certified business that will participate in the contract. A description of work each named Section 3 certified business will perform with the dollar amount of participation. A signed acknowledgement of receipt of information regarding Section 3 requirements and obligation form. A firm commitment to include the HUD Section 3 clause in all subcontracts. A firm commitment to conduct aggressive outreach and notification to potential Section 3 residents and businesses of hiring opportunities using site signage, flyers, etc. Failure to fulfill contractual obligations with HCR pursuant to the Section 3 plan can be construed as a breach of contract and can result in contract termination, a penalty, or other sanctions as allowable under regulations and defined in the contract terms. HCR Section 3 Coordinator. The Section 3 Coordinator must ensure that HCR remains in compliance with Section 3. Therefore, he or she is responsible for ensuring that HCR's activities are in compliance with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations. The Section 3 Coordinator will also lead HCR's review of Section 3 plans. All approved Section 3 plans must become an essential component of the contracting process. HCR Section 3 Coordinator. Provide technical assistance during the process of developing a Section 3 plan. Supply contractors, subcontractors with current lists of Section 3 certified businesses and certified Section 3 qualified residents seeking employment opportunities. Oversee the implementation of all Section 3 plans approved by HCR. And manage education and outreach efforts and other activities that ensure HCR meets its Section 3 obligations. Contractors and subcontractors should designate someone within the project organization as their Section 3 coordinator. This is the person that HCR Section 3 coordinator will be in contact with about reports and other necessary information. He or she will also be responsible for making sure that the organization's activities adhere to the Section 3 plan as set forth in their contract. Best practices for Section 3 outreach. Contractors must meet with a myriad of organizations to form partnerships ensuring workforce development opportunities for Section 3 residents such as housing authorities, nonprofit and social service agencies, labor and union organizations, employment agencies, resident organizations, and other ethnic organizations. New York Housing Authority, New York Department of Labor, New York State Office of Family and Children Services, vocational schools, community colleges, Urban League, NAACP, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Council of La Raza. Section 3 Community Collaboration. What's at risk? HUD Housing and Community Development Resources, Housing Authority Capital and Operating Funds. Why are they at risk? If communities and housing authorities remain non-compliant, HUD resources are at risk of being lost. What is the solution? HCR, units of general and local governments, contractors, developers, etc., must come together and collaborate as one community to develop cross-cutting strategies to meet Section 3 goals. Looking for a Section 3 business? You can find it on HCR's business registry. Monitoring and compliance. HCR must report Section 3 compliance to HUD each year. Annually, HCR is required to submit Form HUD 60002 to HUD's Economic Opportunity Division in Washington, D.C. HCR Section 3 Summary Report to HUD. This is the form that you can find on HCR's website that can be completed by the HCR Section 3 coordinator who would help the Section 3 coordinator that you hire fill this form out. Regular compliance monitoring. The HCR Section 3 coordinator will conduct regular quarterly monitoring compliance reviews for itself and its contractors and subcontractors. Here's an example of the utilization form that the Section 3 coordinator can fill out and report to HCR. Similarly, contractors and subcontractors must report to HCR as prescribed by the agency's Section 3 plan. When noncompliance is found, HCR will notify the noncompliant party of the deficiency and provide recommendations for corrective actions. Record keeping. HCR will generate, receive, and maintain records to document compliance with the Section 3 program objectives. At a minimum, records shall be maintained for 5 years and include specific information and documentation demonstrating that the numerical goals were met, as well as proof that HCR contractor, subcontractor carried out its responsibilities pursuant to law. Enforcement and potential sanctions. Enforcement. Contractors are required to submit a detailed Section 3 plan with firm hiring and contracting goals, which becomes part of their contract. Contractors may also be asked to submit their certified payrolls electronically at the time of contract award and throughout the job. This makes it easier to identify new hires and track duration of employment. Contractors past compliance with Section 3 or past failure to comply with Section 3 will be considered when making awards. Recipients of HCR funding must have no prior Section 3 issues or compliance findings. Fines or penalties will be established for contractors that fail to comply with Section 3 pursuant to their contract. Sanctions. Failure to comply with HCR's Section 3 goals include, but are not limited to, withholding of grant or reimbursement payments, exclusion from participating in future HCR funding processes and applications, including all RFPs or NOFAs, disbarment from doing business with HCR for federal funding programs, and potentially further sanctions, including monetary from federal HUD SHEO office to those impacted by noncompliance. HUD's proposed changes to Section 3. New proposed Section 3 rule. On March 27, 2015, HUD released proposed changes to the Section 3 program. A very good summary was provided by HUD during its webinar with its grant partners. Generally, the proposed changes seek to tighten perceived loopholes and give HUD greater authority to enforce the provisions of the law. Those changes relevant to HCR's operations of the Section 3 program are included in the next few slides. New Section 3 threshold. Section 3 requirements would apply to residents of housing and community development financial assistance that plan to obligate or commit an aggregate amount of $400K or more in Section 3 covered housing rehabilitation, housing construction, demolition, or other public construction annually. Proposed changes to new hire definition. Section 3 currently lacks a provision concerning how long the Section 3 resident should be employed. This allows for employers to hire Section 3 residents for a short term and continually place them in order to increase their performance under the contract. HUD proposes to redefine a new hire as someone who works a minimum of 50% of the hired hours worked in their trade for the duration of the project. For example, if a typical painter works 40 hours per week, then a Section 3 new hire must work a minimum of 20 hours per week for as long as a typical painter worked at the project. Revised definition of Section 3 business concern. The current rule defines a Section 3 business as one that meets one of the three criteria. Section 3 residents own at least 51% of the business, at least 30% of the business are permanent full-time Section 3 residents, or the business commits to subcontract at least 75% of the dollar amount of all of its subcontracts to businesses that meet either of the two criteria. The proposed rule would eliminate the third option due to the fact a pattern of misuse by contractors that initially they would award 25% of subcontracts to Section 3 businesses in order to receive preference for contracts, but never provide contracts to them. Priority for employee retention. The proposed rule gives priority consideration to Section 3 businesses that retain a minimum of 75% of previously Section 3 residents and provide a minimum of 50% of on-the-job training or apprenticeship opportunities to Section 3 residents. Contract. The rule has a goal of awarding at least 10% of the total dollar amount of construction contracts and at least 3% of professional non-construction contracts Section 3 businesses. HUD now sees no statutory basis for distinguishing between construction and non-construction contracts. Therefore, the proposed rule is the technical goal regardless of the type of contract. Section 3 local area. Currently, a Section 3 resident or business anywhere in the nation can receive preference whether or not live in or operate in the metropolitan area where the HUD-assisted work is carried out. The proposed rule would require the Section 3 resident or business to live or be located in the Section 3 local area, defined as the metropolitan statistical area or the non-metropolitan county where the Section 3 project takes place. Self-certification. The proposed rule would allow grantees such as ACR to presume that residents or businesses qualify if they live in disadvantaged census tracts. In addition, ACR must examine a sample of those who self-certify or who are presumed qualified to verify compliance. Monitor payroll for employment data. The proposed rule will require grantees administering Section 3 projects subject to Davis-Bacon prevailing wage obligations to monitor a contractor, subcontractor's payroll for changes in employment, such as terminations, retirements, transfers, and new job vacancies, in order to identify instances when Section 3 obligations are triggered. Labor unions. Projects within jurisdictions that have bargaining agreements with labor unions typically have low rates of Section 3 compliance because unions operate outside of Section 3 obligations. The proposed rule will require grantees to amend all existing agreements with labor unions to ensure that Section 3 obligations are included to prevent labor unions from obstructing recipients' ability to achieve compliance. Stronger penalties. Finally, the proposed rule will seek penalties such as denying or withholding subsequent funds in the event of a breach of contract or failure to adhere to the Section 3 plan in place. This would apply both to HCR and its contractors and subcontractors. Limited English proficiency. Contractors would implement various methods to ensure that low-income, non-English speaking residents have access to job training, employment, and contracting opportunities, including, but not limited to, specific LEAP outreach in minority neighborhoods through signage and bill placement, placement of media advertising on minority TV and radio stations to disperse information, and providing for multilingual translation when communication with LEAP individuals or groups. That has brought us to the end of this webinar. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact HCR Section 3 Coordinator Gwen Pope at the email and phone number provided below. Thank you for attending this webinar.